He won't stop until he destroys half the universe. Everything you know, everything you love, it will all be gone.
Together, we can stop Thanos.
We don't want to kill you, but we will.
Hello, and welcome to an extra special post-Avengers Infinity War reaction episode of We'll Review It Our Shelves, the podcast where we normally review the movies on our shelves. We're doing something a little bit different this time, as Avengers Infinity War has opened this weekend. Both Dan and I have gone to see it independently of each other. Dan will be recording his reactions. I recorded my reactions as well as some of the reactions of my family, and strangely enough, a gentleman that we ran into at the movie theater who also happened to see Thor Ragnarok with us. That was kind of a convenient happenstance, and I really appreciated his time and patience in putting up with me sticking a microphone in his face to get his reactions. He was watching the movie with his family. He stuck around after the post-credits scene to talk to me for a few minutes, and that'll be included in this episode as well. I do want to warn you that there are spoilers galore in this episode, so if you have not seen Avengers Infinity War, then pause now. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed the movie as much as I did. My initial reaction to this movie, I could have watched another 3 hours of this and not been disappointed. This was a fantastic movie, and I cannot quite articulate how enjoyable it was to see all of the characters from all of the movies that we had previously seen interacting with each other. I was shocked in the first 5 minutes before they even rolled the opening credits when both Loki and Heimdall were killed to death by Thanos. I liked the way they got the Hulk to... I liked the way they got the Hulk back to Earth to warn Earth of the pending threat. That was a nice touch. Trying to compare where things showed up in the trailers and where they showed up in the movies was kind of a hoot. I knew that Peter Dinklage was in this movie, but I was spending so much time looking for him to be the character that I thought he was going to be that, quite honestly, I didn't even recognize him as the dwarf that helped Thor build Stormbreaker. There were a lot of interesting scenes, a lot of good interplay between the characters, and as I said earlier, I could have watched another 3 hours and been just fine. The interaction between Bucky and Rocket was pretty much what I expected. There had to be a joke in there about the arm, but it was still fresh and funny. I laughed out loud when Bucky picked up Rocket Raccoon and started shooting at the invading hordes with him as an extension of his other arm. That was pretty awesome. There were so many poignant notes when Thanos finally acquired all of the Infinity Stones and put them in the glove and started rewriting reality. Characters that I did not expect to be killed in that were taken away, but from the interesting standpoint of the way the comic books work, it gives some of the other characters the opportunity to shine. Black Panther was one of the characters that was removed from reality, and this will give Shuri an opportunity to assume the role of the Black Panther, which she has done in the comic books. I did not expect Spider-Man to die. I did like the Spider-Man Iron Spider costume as seen in the comics. It was a different take on the costume, which I was never a huge fan of in the comics. I hope they don't keep it around for too long, as I've always been a fan of the red and blue Spider-Man. Captain America was Captain America, and I like the fact that they kept the continuity from the previous movies. Rhodey was walking around with a brace on, and they were powered so that he could walk normally. I loved the fact that they gave a reason for Hawkeye not being there. They sort of covered everything that they had previously laid down. Even Samuel Jackson and Kobe Smulders, Nick Fury, and Agent Hill made an appearance in the after credits scene. It was absolutely phenomenal, and I strongly recommend that you go see it if you're a fan of the Marvel movies. So with that, we will jump into some of the recordings from prior to the movie. We sort of discussed our anticipatory feelings towards the movie and what we were hoping to see. Very general, very non-specific. One of the people in our group, whom you've met before on our Insidious episode, Avery, had already seen the movie and was kind of looking forward to some of the stuff that she missed. So we'll let her talk about that in the audio clips. So here we go. Okay, we are here on Sunday morning about to watch Avengers Infinity War. And we have, if you recall from one of our previous episodes, a friend of our daughter's, friend of the family, Avery, who has already seen the movie, but she's going to tell us her anticipation. She's going to tell us her thoughts about seeing it for the second time in sort of an anticipatory, no spoilers kind of way. Avery?
Hi. I'm excited to see the things that I didn't really notice that would kind of give away some of the plot for the next movie, but yeah.
Cool. And McKenna's with us, but she doesn't want to say anything, so we're not even going to give her the opportunity. We're going to move over here and slide over a couple of seats. So with us also are Cassidy and her boyfriend. Cassidy's given me the look like she doesn't actually want to say anything about her thoughts towards the movie. So I'm just going to tell you what she had told me earlier was that she's just looking forward to seeing the movie in the first place. So George, did you have any anticipation towards this movie as far as, you know, what you kind of are hoping for, or?
I don't know if there's anything I'm particularly hoping for, but I know a lot of my friends have said, oh, it's a really good movie, you need to see it, it's kind of a big deal, so just general movie anticipation, long-awaited movie anticipation.
Okay. And have you seen all of the preceding movies?
Except for Spider-Man Homecoming, yes.
Okay. Yeah, you can come over to the house and watch that sometime, I reckon. All right, and over here, we're going to talk to Christy real quick and see how she's feeling about the movie in an excitement sort of state.
I'm just excited. I heard it was a really good movie, so I liked the first Avengers movie, so I'm excited.
Well, there you have it. We have about 2 minutes of excitement. We showed up early on a Sunday morning. We got here at about 8:40. It's now 9:15.
And froze our butts off.
And apparently we froze our butts off. So we are going to shut this down, and then we are going to talk afterwards about how we felt about the movie. I know I'm looking forward to seeing all of the characters that they've put together for the last 10 years and 18, 19, 40,000 movies in one concerted effort to battle Thanos. And a real quick story, at one point I mispronounced his name, but it's a proper name, so there's really however he wants to pronounce it is the way that matters. I'm looking forward to seeing the interaction between the various characters that we've seen in their own solo movies and I'm looking forward to seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm guessing, get to Earth so that Peter Quill can finally come home and then realize that he just needs to go back to space. So, all right, see you on the other side. So that was everyone's anticipatory thoughts and feelings, and our next audio recording is from the gentleman I mentioned earlier that we had met when we were waiting in line for Thor Ragnarok. So let's hear what Scott has to say. Okay, so we are actually in the theater, and we ran into someone that we were waiting in line for Thor Ragnarok with, so we're going to include him in this podcast. So I don't remember your name, although I'm pretty sure we probably got that when we were waiting in line, but it's been a minute, so please forgive me. So we're going to basically, what we're looking for right now is, what are you kind of hoping for? Are you excited about the movie? Obviously, you showed up on a Sunday morning, so I'm guessing yes, but, just kind of your thoughts and feelings, why you're excited to see the movie and what you're hoping for.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the movie that everything's been leading up to. Definitely excited. Scott, by the way. And
nice to meet you again, Scott.
Nice to meet you too. So I came here with my kids. Basically, I'm just hoping that Captain America makes it through this movie alive.
Well, from the news, I know Chris Evans has said that he would sign up for Avengers 4 if he needed to, but that could have been one of those red herrings to draw you off the
Or it could be a if he comes in as a flashback thing or something like that too. Yeah. So knowing
this one's already seen it, so she already knows.
No spoilers.
Yeah, no, she's been very good about that. I actually did hear who dies in this movie as well, and it's DC's Hopes and Dreams. So, I know a couple of people that have already seen it. They said it was pretty good. So
yeah, no, I imagine it will be amazing. But with the amount of people in it, that somebody is going to get hurt, die, something like that.
Certainly.
I know,
yeah, absolutely.
War Machine and Civil War was a. They kind of alluded to somebody dying in Civil War before that movie came out, but it didn't happen.
Right. So but that's the wonderful thing about this is you can kind of bring them back. This is one of the things that I've talked to my family about and some friends is the Marvel comic books, or any comic books really. If a character dies, they can come back, and it's usually
yeah.
Well, he's on TV. That doesn't count.
He's still alive.
He's her favorite.
But for the most part, if they're dead, they stay dead, as opposed to the comic books where they'll come back after a year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever. I think Wolverine's been dead for quite some time, but they even brought him back as Old Man Logan. So, you're never really dead until your Uncle Ben dead. With real people who have to actually age, and you have to find a way to get them out of the movies, does give it a little more gravity, a little more weight.
Well, also in the comics too, that Bucky for a time was Captain America, Falcon for a time was Captain America. So I mean, you've got these younger guys that are able to step up
you've got
into that Captain America spot, and it's not really getting out of the comic book storylines to have those guys step into that role. So knowing that Chris Evans only signed a deal for 3 Captain America movies and 3 Avenger movies, he's done all 3 of the Captain Americas.
And he did the cameo in Spider-Man Homecoming. So
he did the cameo in Thor as well, in the Dark World.
But all right. Well, I'm going to stop bothering you and let you enjoy the movie. Well, not quite yet. We still got
bother.
Still got another 25 minutes or so. I appreciate your time, Scott. Thanks again. Nice to meet you.
Good seeing you again.
Maybe we'll see you at the next Marvel event movie.
Probably.
Cool. All right. Thanks.
Yep.
And that wraps up our pre-Infinity War expectations and anticipation comments. Again, want to thank random people at the theater for putting up with my shoving a telephone in his face to record the reactions. And we will move on to our post-movie reactions. First up will be my daughter Cassidy's boyfriend George, who had to run and go to work, so he was unable to see the post-credits stinger, so we'll have to fill him in later. And let's go right to his reactions. Alright, we're sitting here rolling through the credits. George has to go to work, so what we're trying to do is maybe get his 1 or 2 word reaction to Avengers Infinity War.
So that just happened. Some people died I did not expect to die, and then I'm going to be honest, I am expecting them to come back for Avengers 4, whatever that's called, but I'm not expecting everyone to stay dead.
Fair enough. I mean, he does have the reality stone, the time stone. He's got all the stones, so
Yeah.
he can undo what he did. But,
Or I think possibly, because we've seen other people who said they couldn't wield the Infinity Stones, so who knows, someone else might get the gauntlet in the next Avengers.
I have some theories about that were set up in previous movies, but that is because I know probably a little bit more about the comic book history than you do. So I have a thought or two. And I'm not going to talk about it here because it's speculation, and I will get to it when I get to it. Cool. Cassidy, did you have anything to say? Okay. Cassidy has nothing to say. All right, well, have a good time at work.
Thank you.
So, once again, I want to thank George for his reactions, and our next recording is going to be from our new friend Scott, who, again, we happened to attend a movie with before and didn't even realize that we knew each other. So, without further ado, we shall move on to Scott's post-Avengers Infinity War reactions. So, jumped over to our friendly meet-again guest at the movies, Scott. We're trying to get his reaction to Avengers Infinity War. Take your time. Tell me whatever you feel like saying.
Oh, it's a great movie. So my daughter was telling me we actually had a lot of the same thoughts, but it's funny how she said that movie was an emotional roller coaster. So there was ups and downs. I mean, the funny stuff, the bad stuff that happens at the end. It's kind of classic storytelling, though. Really, you have it's going to get worse before it gets better, kind of thing. I was telling her right after the end of the movie, as we were watching the credits, it's just like The Empire Strikes Back. All of the bad stuff in Star Wars in the original 3 movies happens in The Empire Strikes Back. Han Solo gets put in carbonite. Luke Skywalker loses his hand, finds out that Darth Vader is his father. So you have to have that dark time, and I think what Marvel did was absolutely masterful here because they're building an anticipation for the next movie. Yeah. Everybody, I mean, this movie has already broken box office records. Everybody who went to see this movie now can't wait for the next part to come out. So
right, because you have to find out what happens.
Right, it's really amazing. I am glad, though, that Captain America made it through. I was kind of worried that, with Chris Evans being in the last movie of his contract, obviously he's going to have to now because he's the leader of the Avengers.
Sure, so he's the heart and soul. He always has been.
He's the glue that holds them together, and he's got to bring them back together so that they can, get this. And I was telling my daughter, too, that, once if they can get back the time stone and the reality stone, or even just get their hands on the gauntlet at all, they can set all of this, right and fix everything, just like Doctor Strange did at the end of the movie Doctor Strange, where he had to figure out, all those different
all the
futures,
different
what's the right thing. And he even kind of alluded to it when he was telling Tony on Titan, this was the only way. So he's already
million futures.
So he has already foreseen what's going to happen. So he knew that all this bad stuff had to happen, so that they can set it right. And he had to set it on the right path to get to that future, that one future.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly.
So great foreshadowing, I think. I can't wait, obviously, for the next Avengers to come out.
Yeah, there were actually a couple of things that because I'm familiar with the comic book history, that I was looking for, that I think will happen in the next series of movies, because the way the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, the Infinity War, and all the other Infinity-related storylines have played out, they've all depended on certain characters that aren't there yet, but they have been alluded to in previous movies that I think are gonna show up in the future. Obviously, Captain Marvel from the end credits, Sting, and all that kind of stuff, but we already knew that.
Right.
And I think one of the things that Marvel has done masterfully is not release, aside from what we already know, the slate of Phase 4 films.
Right.
So you don't know who survives. You don't know who sticks around. I agree with you. I think that all of the deaths at the end of the movie can be undone. I was, however, shocked, and I don't think it will be undone with Loki and Heimdall's deaths at the beginning.
Right.
I don't think they'll go back that far.
Yeah.
So, but that
Got a
his daughter just
Heimdall
said
fan here.
they should. I agree, but I tell you that
I
first,
even like Loki, even though he's terrible.
first death in the movie, I was like, ah!
Yeah.
Got a
That's
little,
what she said. She's like,
got a little
Heimdall
move.
in the
It's
first
undone.
5
Yeah.
minutes.
So, but all right, cool. Well, thanks. I assume your kids liked it. You guys like it?
Yeah.
Everybody liked
Hannah,
it.
Chloe, and Logan.
All right, Hannah, Chloe, and Logan. Nice to meet you all.
Liked it, but hated
Okay.
it at the same time.
I cannot wait for the
Love,
next
hate
one. That's really
relationship.
the way I feel about it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thanks.
That's
Thanks
fantastic.
again for your time.
No problem.
And once again, I want to thank Scott and his family for providing their input into this podcast and giving us their reactions to the movie. I know it had to be a little awkward talking to a semi-random stranger in the movie theater and kind of waiting for everyone to clear out before we collected that recording. But thanks again, and let's move on to what the rest of my family and I thought about the movie. Okay, so we are post Avengers Infinity War, post credit stinger Avengers Infinity War. We're actually in the car, getting ready to go home, trying to get those initial reactions. So, Christy, how did you feel about Avengers Infinity War?
Okay, spoilers alert. So, I liked it. However, the ending left me quite shocked. I was shocked at who did not make it. I thought the people that did make it were not going to make it, vice versa. So I was very surprised. But overall, very good movie.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? Were there any scenes you didn't like?
I don't know.
Okay. Were there any specific scenes that you cared for a great deal?
I don't know.
I mean, I know I laughed out loud when...
Oh, I liked a lot of the humor. I thought it was very well placed and correctly placed. It wasn't overdone. It wasn't underdone. It was just the right amount, but still not like too cheesy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I liked when Bucky picked up Rocket Raccoon and started shooting with him, and we all knew that there was going to be, I'm going to need that arm joke, or I'm getting that arm joke, or Rocket Raccoon arm joke, so...
Yeah, I agree. Same thing with the Eye and Thor. I mean, there had to be the big tie in there too, but
Yeah.
I did appreciate a lot of the way it intricately wove all of the different stories together.
Cool. All right. Avery, how did you feel?
I liked the movie, but I didn't like how some of the deaths turned out.
Well, this is your second time through, so did that change it for you? Were you able to see a lot more things?
No, not really. There are some things that I was like, what? Like when he, spoiler, got the reality stone, I didn't really understand, like, when they changed when he changed, I forgot the name of the place.
Nowhere?
When he changed nowhere into everything going up into flames, I didn't understand why he did that. I don't know.
I think it was a test for Gamora to see if she would do what she was going to do, so...
Yeah, but I liked it.
Did you like it as much the second time?
Yes. It was enjoyable.
Okay, cool. Well, Cassidy and McKenna did not wish to share their thoughts and feelings, but I think they liked the movie. So they're both giving me thumbs up and head nods, so we will consider that a positive affirmation of the film all the way around from my family, and I will talk to you all later about my thoughts and feelings because, as mentioned earlier when I was talking to our intermittent movie companion, I know a few things, and I know that there are certain things that were laid down in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, for example, that have yet to come to fruition. And I expect that will be handled in the next movie. It was nice to see Samuel L. Jackson, even though it was, again, spoiler, in the closing credits, because he's been in every Avengers movie so far. And it was nice to see Maria Hill back as well, even though they were only there for seconds. And they did sting the Captain Marvel movie, which is about the only other movie in Phase 4 that we know about. So, all right, well, I'm going to wrap this up, and I will expand on my comments a little bit later. So that kind of wraps up my family and our movie-going reactions, and again, anticipation prior to, as well as our new friend Scott. Up next will be Dan's post-movie thoughts and feelings, and we will follow that up with a real quick discussion between Dan and I about how we felt about the movie overall. And Dan, over to you.
So wow, just got out of watching Avengers: Infinity War, and it's everything I expected and nothing of what I expected. And what an emotional roller coaster ride it was. I mean, it's just like there was so much to be excited about and so much to put a lump in your throat, and it's just and I as Brian has said, could have easily sat and watched this movie for another 3 hours. I mean, this could literally have been a 5 or 6 hour movie, and as long as everything was on pace and par with the action and the story, I would have sat comfortably, because at the end of it, we were just like, wow, it's over already? Never mind, 2.5 hours went by. It was like, wow, already. A lot of great things that we were expecting, that we were hoping for. A lot of surprises that we weren't expecting. Um, I'm because the characters are so well developed, I felt for a lot of them. Rocket's like easily one of my favorite characters, and man, that guy going through an emotional roller coaster himself. And it's like I don't know if we'll go through spoilers on this one, but needless to say, at the end of it, there were a lot of people who were on the gambit of saddened and pissed off. So it's my individual take on it. We'll talk about it.
Okay, and that was Dan's personal take post Avengers Infinity War. We are going to jump into our about 20-minute conversation that we had about this movie because we didn't want to go too far into depth. There are some spoilers, again, as you've already been warned, but this is Dan and I discussing Avengers Infinity War. We hope you enjoy it. And now we are in the Dan and Brian converse about Avengers Infinity War.
Hey.
So let's start this conversation off with one quick question. Is this going to be on your shelf?
Hell no, man. Screw that. No, of course. I think this is...
I hated this movie. It was terrible.
If there's such a thing as loyal listeners to our podcast, I think they would be able to answer this question too. It's just a big duh. It's like that money is already spent. It's like I'm not even gonna wait for the discount bin. I'm talking full release day price.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that.
It's and it'll probably be. I'm gonna try to find the most special edition with all the extras and everything, because because the first thing we bring up on this, it's like, and I believe you said you noticed this, that a lot of the scenes in the trailer were not in the final theatrical cut.
Yes, specifically there was a scene in the trailer where the Hulk was in the background and it wasn't the Hulk.
Yeah, I think though that that particular one, that's the first one that really came to mind. Is when you see where they're in Wakanda and they're all doing their running charge and everything. I think that was more of a promotional thing, and that's why because I mean, the scene I'm talking about specifically is there's a scene where Banner is standing next to the Hulkbuster hand,
Hmm.
and it looks like he's just having a casual conversation, and it looks like it's before the battle because they don't look like they've been through anything.
Yeah.
So I imagine there's a pre-battle scene
Maybe
that
it'll be in the extended edition.
possibly, and hence that's why I want to buy a special edition because if it's not if there's no extended edition, then there's definitely gonna be one with all the deleted scenes and commentary and everything. I want that.
Absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly. I will spend my hard-earned dollars on that the day it comes out.
Absolutely, yes. Working extra time at the airport for that.
Yay, airport! Thank you. So, how did you feel about the movie? I know we have your audio clip prior to this, but you and me, how did you feel?
I think this is. I'm gonna say it, and it might piss off people, and other people might agree, but this is this decade's Empire Strikes Back. The excitement was there was no disappointment. I mean, the anticipation, the excitement was all fulfilled, even though the movie left off with such a huge downer. I mean, it's like our heroes are decimated. The villain won, and we're just like, what the? No, what happened?
Hey, what? You're supposed to win. You're Avengers.
And and it's like, yeah, this is this decade's Empire Strikes Back.
It's funny you mention that because one of the recordings that I made at the theater was with a gentleman that I had went and seen Thor Ragnarok with. We were waiting in line together, and he actually mentioned that it was just like The Empire Strikes Back, where you leave off on a downer. Han Solo's been frozen, Luke's got his hand cut off, he finds out that Darth Vader's his dad. This is...
The rebellion has been routed, they're scattered.
Yeah, this is the storm before success. You have to go down before you can come up, and they are down. There were some deaths that I was not expecting. And I know you and I had chatted earlier, and one of the most emotionally impactful scenes for me, and you agreed, was when Peter Parker was starting to disappear, and he had that panicked, emotional, like, I don't want to go. I don't often get emotional at the movies, but being such a huge Spider-Man fan, for me, it was like, but I just started liking him.
And that's the thing, I mean, he's, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he's a kid, and with the other adults, it's like the first one to go, was Bucky, and when he realized what was going on, and it's just like, he's a soldier, and it's just like the realization is like, hey, I think this is that moment, type of thing, and he was more accepting of it. The rest of them were just, kind of in a state of shock, but at the same time, very accepting. Whereas Peter, I mean, he's a child. Yeah, he's got his whole life ahead of him. He's got the most to lose as far as. Way to kill it there, Brian. But since you destroyed that, the thing that went through my mind on this, and this is just kind of a little bit of a tangent here, it was such a reminder of this little anecdote of history, and it was during the French Revolution when the people were gathering up the aristocrats and taking them to the guillotine, lopping off their heads and everything. And, the crowd cheered. Everybody just, was like, yeah, take that and everything. Except for one. It was this young lady. I don't know I forget who it was. I forget her name and everything. But, man, she went to that guillotine kicking and screaming, horrified at what was to come. She didn't take it like a noble person. And she was the only one that the crowd did not cheer for. The crowd actually wept for her. It was like all of a sudden there was like a human element to this, like, these weren't these people that they wanted to put to death. This was an actual person they had sympathy for. And that whole Peter Parker thing kind of reminded me of that little aspect in history because, yeah, we were angry and we were disappointed to see these heroes start to dissolve. But, man, Peter was such an emotional kick in the chest.
Because everyone else took it so stoically. Like you said, Bucky was like, okay, I guess I'm going. Everybody else was just silently accepting, but also with a little bit of stunned, oh, well, crap. I mean, Peter,
Yeah.
he had time to react. He had the emotional reaction that I think characterized all of the responses that you would expect, but he got to be the one that represented that huge emotional rip.
Yeah, and then he had Tony to, he had Tony's shoulder to cry on, type of thing, because that's his father figure. That was his
mentor,
mentor,
yeah.
And then of course the feedback of that is Stark's guilt for bringing him into this.
And that, I think, is why that was placed there from a movie-making standpoint, because Tony Stark has to be affected by this. He already was, but to have Peter Parker crying on his shoulder, disappearing in his hands, it's almost like him dying at his feet. He had to do that there for Tony Stark to have that reaction that we want him to have.
Yeah. Of course, the one that's a very close second for me, as far as that kind of that low emotion, was Rocket's reaction when Groot disappeared. Because that, to me, that is the second time Rocket's had to go through that. Because with Groot's sacrifice in Guardians of the Galaxy, yeah, that moved Rocket. Did it move the rest of us? Probably not, because it's like it's not the traditional like, oh, we don't have as much sympathy because Rocket's not a human.
I disagree with that. I mean, I think that everyone felt it when Groot died.
Well, they felt something, but I don't know if they felt the same as like I said. Like I said, it's a very close second for me because again, it's the second time he had to lose Groot, and
I agree.
Just at the, and there's to see him sitting on the tree stump processing that loss again, because he's going to be incredibly angry when he comes out of that. I mean, everybody, Gamora and Nebula have their motivations against Thanos. Thor has his motivations. Like you said, Tony now has his motivation. Rocket, I think, is going to be the one that nobody's really going to focus on, but he's definitely going to be a major player in that because now he has, I think, that real grudge that the rest of them have.
Okay, fair enough. I think that Steve Rogers, Captain America, has that as well because he lost Bucky again. It's a second, maybe even third time if you want to get, kind of weirdly technical in the whole mind control thing of the Winter Soldier. That's the third time that he's lost Bucky. You don't just get over that, which I think is going to be played out in some of the follow-on movies. Captain Marvel is a prequel, if you will. It's supposed to take place in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, from what I understand, is going to take place slightly pre-Infinity War, which seems kind of weird. I would have thought that they would have done that sort of afterwards, or at the very least simultaneously.
I think it will further explain why he was absent in Infinity War, because I mean they did mention that Hawkeye and Ant-Man, they have families and they just kind of like went into deeper hiding and didn't want to be part of all this.
Right.
And we'll probably see that a little bit more in Ant-Man and Wasp.
Oh, absolutely. So, favorite scene?
Whew, whoa.
There's so many.
Just one. There's a lot. Before I answer that question, I would have to say there would be a lot more if a lot of the WoW scenes weren't in the trailer. I mean, the scene where Captain America makes his appearance would have been freaking awesome if I wasn't already seen that hundreds of times in the trailer. Where he catches a spear, walks out of the shadow, that would have been so much better. When Spider-Man gets his Iron Spider suit, that would have been awesome. I mean, the crowd still cheered, don't get me wrong. It was still exciting, but it would have been so much better if I hadn't seen it 100 times already in the trailer.
Fair enough.
That being said, I'd have to say that my favorite scene was Thor's appearance in Wakanda. When he got revived, he has his Stormbreaker, and he shows up and, Banner's like, oh, you guys are so screwed. It's just I mean, and that's the thing, because, I mean, there's a scene in the trailer where Groot watches Thor holding up Stormbreaker over his head and summoning lightning and, again, not in the final cut because all you see is Thor's fingers twitch with a little bit of electricity in it, and then next thing you know, he's in Wakanda. So, the rest of it's implied.
Yeah.
So he got the axe, he's good to go, and now he's fighting mad and everything. And to me, that was awesome. When the Bifrost just shows up and you're just like, oh, yeah,
For me, it kind of comes down to a couple of things. There were some things that I really laughed out loud at, but what I cared for a great deal was when Heimdall created the Bifrost or created the transport and sent Banner to Earth. That was not how I expected that to happen, and that was pretty cool. Don't know if it meets my favorite scene, but it was pretty cool. When Peter is on the bus and he looks at his buddy, and I cannot for the life of me, the kid in the chair, Genki is what I'm going to call him because that's, who he is in the comic books, whether they want him to be or not. When he taps him on the shoulder and says, I need you to cause a distraction, and he gets up and just runs down the bus, oh my God, we're all going to die! That was hilarious because it was not only true, but it was just one of those things where you're like, that's a distraction. Not exactly what I was expecting. Okay, cool. So, Peter hops out of the bus, and it was super great. I will say that when Bucky picked up Rocket and was just shooting from one arm and holding Rocket, who was shooting out the other arm and spinning around, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have a favorite scene. I mean, there were a couple of laugh out loud moments, but I think the best scene was when you see Tony trying to save Peter. I mean, I know the emotional piece, but that was a good scene. It was well acted. It was well put together. It meant a lot to me. So I think that was my favorite scene. I'll have to see it again to make sure, and I will see it again.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see it again in the theaters. I'm not waiting for this to come out on Blu-ray. I gotta say though, the biggest, and you mentioned the scene where Bucky picks up Rocket. Shortly right after that was probably the biggest laugh out loud moment where I cheered out loud. I was probably the only one in the theater. I don't know, maybe I couldn't have been the only one who got this. Is because he picks him up, and then after that whole thing, he looks at his gun, and Rocket goes, "It's like, how much for the gun?" And it's like, "It's not for sale." "How much for the arm?" They're like, I said it.
That was the joke I was waiting for. I knew it had to happen, but I still laughed. The joke density in this movie was just right. They were well placed. They were well situated in that they made sense in the scene. And it kind of cut that nervous edge of we're about to go into battle with what basically amounts to a god. And not Thor, Loki, Norse gods. I mean, an actual, literal, I can do whatever I want, god.
Yeah, I gotta say that again, Tony Stark's use of pop culture reference to calling forgive me, what's the character's name who did most of the talking? Yeah, what's Squidward's, what's his real name?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with the Obsidian Order, I believe it is. So you'll have to forgive me. That sounds
like that was Obsidian Order. That's a Star Trek reference.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Now I don't even know the name. Now I'm gonna ruin my nerd cred because that's something that came out after I stopped reading comic books, and I don't actually recall it in the Infinity Gauntlet crossover event. So I'm stuck. Well,
those guys, Squidward. By the way, I loved his character. I think he should have gotten a more brutal death than just being sucked down into space. I mean, he was so evil. I wanted to see somebody literally beat the crap out of him. But, okay. But I find it very amusing, though, that, Peter Parker uses pop culture references. And it pisses Tony off. And, after the movie, I'm just going, it's like, why are you so pissed off at Peter Parker for using that? Because you do that all the time. You called Thor Point Break. You called Hawkeye Legolas,
Well, I think there's two reasons for that, and it could just be me. One, what Tony said in Spider-Man Homecoming to Peter, you're supposed to be better than me. And two, he doesn't preface them with, hey, you guys remember that really old movie? So Tony feels old. He's like, stop saying that The Empire Strikes Back is old, or Aliens, or whatever, because it's not that old.
True. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it doesn't piss me off. Which, speaking of pissed off about movie references or anything like that, tell me you didn't feel that when Star-Lord goes, it's like, Footloose, best movie ever? And Parker's like, no, it wasn't. Way to make friends there, Peter.
That was never the best movie ever. Way to go, Peters. The funny thing was, at the time that Peter Quill left Earth, the original Kevin Bacon Footloose was popular, and they make references to Kevin Bacon again, which is fine. But Footloose was remade around Peter Parker's time frame. So even if it were an old movie reference, they could be talking about two different Footlooses.
That's a possibility. I like that.
All right, so let's wrap this up. I don't want to get too far down the road because we could talk about this movie for hours. So you said you're going to own it. You said you're going to see it again. I don't even know what else to say.
I just have to say, and I usually ask like where does this go on the shelf. This is basically going to be the crowning jewel in what is already a collection that I don't want to say is unique because I mean obviously I have Star Wars in a little separate section. I even have the Alien franchise in a little separate section. This will be, a very highlightable collection in my collection because I mean we're talking 10 years worth of 18 movies, all of them epic, whether it be 19, 20 movies by the time this is all done, 21, 22, because I mean we still got Avengers 4, Ant-Man and Wasp, and Captain Marvel. It'll keep going. I'm sure they're all going to be as epic as always, and it's going to be quite the section on my shelf.
I agree. This will go probably on my top shelf, and it may depend on what kind of extras and that sort of thing. But you know what? I'm not even gonna lie. It's gonna go on the top shelf.
There you go.
So ruining our review of Avengers: Infinity War when we do get it top shelf. One thing I did want to close out with is my estimation of what Marvel has done in an overall sense that I really admire, and that is one, what you already spoke of, bringing together 10 years worth of movies, 18 movies, and just putting them all together into a story that made sense. Are there holes along the way in the timeline and the continuity? Sure. I don't really care. I can put that aside. I had a fantastic time at this movie. But one of the things that they've also done that they hadn't done previously is for Phase 4, they've only released the names of 2 of the movies. And that's Ant-Man and Wasp and Captain Marvel, which we've already mentioned. The other remaining 2 or 3 Phase 4 movies, we don't know the names of those movies. And now that we have half of the Marvel Universe superheroes gone, what are they going to make? What's the next movie after those 2? We don't know. And that keeps the suspense going, so you don't know going in. Well, now people will know going in, but before the movie was released, you didn't know who was going to live and who was going to die, and how that affects the next movie slate. Because something I'd said earlier to Scott, who I met at the theater again, was that in these movies, the characters can die because they actually have to age, unlike comic books where no one's dead unless they're Uncle Ben dead. And even Uncle Ben has come back in visions and in alternate universes and that sort of thing. So no one ever really stays dead in comic books for the most part. In these movies, they can stay dead unless it's a plot element, and they usually resolve it within that movie, like Loki's played dead a couple of times, that sort of thing. So I think Marvel has done a fantastic job, and I think that dealing with the real-world intricacies of people aging out of the role, they have kept it fresh and kept introducing new characters in order to keep that universe moving.
I agree. Here's hoping that they did never falter.
Yeah, I hope DC takes a lesson from this. I don't mind the darker DC stuff, but they need to get their act together and come up with a cohesive plan a la Disney/Marvel.
Although I gotta say, though, that this was like... there was the meme that I saw that was the biggest Avengers Infinity War spoiler. Guess who dies? DC's Hope,
Yeah. And I did use that joke when I was speaking to Scott and my wife, and I've told that joke a couple of times already. So, listeners, you're going to hear that a couple of times, or rather, you already know you're going to hear it a couple of times because we're at the end of the episode. Let me remind you, you can contact us with your thoughts and feelings about Avengers Infinity War or any other movies that we've reviewed on our Facebook page or at WRIOS2016mr@gmail.com. And I do know that sending audio files works because that's how I got them off my phone. I emailed them to our Gmail account.
Cool.
So with that, we will see you for a regularly scheduled episode, which will drop Tuesday, which is Rock of Ages, the extended edition. And one correction to the Rock of Ages extended edition episode. We actually did get some listener feedback, and it was from Jeff Edwards, who said, another great episode, keep them coming. And he also added 3 new movies to our listener request list, and they were Blade Runner 2049, The Matrix, and Galaxy Quest. So this doesn't count as a regular episode, so we still have a couple more to go before we get to that. But thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this out of the ordinary, slightly different. We interrupt your regularly scheduled preemptive strike, as Dan said, review of Avengers Infinity War.